Greetings, workers, peasants, and petty bourgeois intellectuals tuning into This is Revolution. My name is Jean Vagelan, TAR's very own petty bourgeois intellectual. In for Jason Miles, who is taking a well earned rest and some family time today on this lovely White Guy Wednesday. Now, a lot of you have been complaining about White Guy Wednesday, that White Guy Wednesday is not white enough. Kuba obviously is a Pole, so he is a white ethnic. Van is Jewish, so also marginally white. And I myself, of course, have Kurdish ancestry. And despite the Kurds' attempt for 150 years to prove that they are white people and the true Aryans, sadly, this has not come to pass, as we are yet to be fully white. However, in response to your criticism, I'd like you all to know that we do listen to the comments, and we've decided to white it up today with some very special honkies coming on for to talk about a topic that I think is kind of interesting. It's a little bit fun, but talk about flyover country as the coastal elites like to refer to it, and try and bring a little bit of nuance to the conversation, given that on one hand we have a whole group of people who think the people of the Midwest are irredeemable deplorables, and another group of people who almost fetishize the mythical white working class. Blessed are the pool cleaning company owners, as it were. So I thought to myself, who would I discuss this with? Well, there are two very special honkies who know a lot about this topic. The first is my dear friend, Patrick Needham, formerly of the Hoot and Holler podcast, resident of Springfield, Missouri, and true Ozarks rebel, Pat. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Gene. I am very honored to be bestowed the title of Special Honky.
Special honky. Exactly. You are a very special honky, and we're really pleased to have you on the show today. But of course, Patrick is not the only honky out there. We have a last minute, very special guest coming in as well, all the way from the great state of Texas, the one, the only, David Grisham of Left Reckoning. Welcome.
Thank you, Gene. I don't think you can introduce me like that, but I'll take it.
The great state of Texas. Well, I've been wanting to.
Well, you can say that for sure. That's not the problem. The number one honky.
Number one honky. You're both my number one honkies.
No, sorry, not to take you off of your flow, but I did my family genealogy recently, and I went to school, I studied philosophy, and I was particularly interested in French philosophy. I was like, man, this is gonna be really amazing. Like, I'm gonna find out like I'm French, or maybe Spanish or Italian or something. Nah. Like 400 years in this country came from Wales, like 100% for better or worse. I am that honky.
Pure honky. How about you, Patrick? Are you pure honky?
I am pretty pure honky. Yeah, there's a lot of English, a little Irish, but mostly via the colonizer route. Yeah.
Well, I've learned my lesson with genetic tests. I wanted to troll my dad, who is a hardcore Kurdish nationalist. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get him this for his birthday. He's going to find out like he's like 80% Arab. And like his genetic map literally turned out to be a map of Kurdistan. Like,
that's okay.
And so now he's like, yes, I am the purest of Kurds. I was like, oh God, like that'll teach me. That'll teach me to mess around with race science, as it were. I just actually remember seeing there was this one where this woman, another one of you honkies, was like, she did one of these genetic tests, and she was like, well, my great grandmammy was a Cherokee princess, and we've always known that in the family. And like she was like devastated when she found out her grandmother was actually African American.
Oh boy.
I was like, start crying. It's like, I'm sorry.
Sorry about your family mythology.
Sorry about your family mythology. There's a lot of Cherokee princesses out there.
It's amazing how many Cherokee. Either that or there's one Cherokee princess far enough back that it was responsible for like every white person's, great grandmother.
Exactly. I mean, like she must have got around, as it were. I mean, the it's actually quite interesting. The whole like Cherokee princess stories in the Midwest. It's like what does that
Oh, I
even
mean,
mean?
it's everywhere, right?
Yeah, but it's
Like there is probably a prevalence here.
So, like, I know, Gina, I know you have a whole show planned for us, but I'm just going to take a point of contention before we get into it. One thing, and I forgive you for this because you're British,
Mhm.
right? But when you talk about Texas Midwest, like it drives me nuts because Texas is not the Midwest.
No, the Texas is the Confederacy.
You just have that queued up.
we have we have that queued up on for White Guy Wednesdays. This is when Vaughn and I, Vaughn, me and Kuba came up with the idea that we should try and bring back a kind of left-wing neo-confederalism, which says, although the Confederates had problems, at least they fought the capitalist imperialist Americans.
Jesus.
Wow, that's
Yeah, well, I'm staying out of that.
Maoism,
Yeah.
Maoism, Calhounism, the People's War.
Jesus Christ, Mouse Calhounism.
Maoist
That is a dark
That's
dark turn in
and I'm
ideology.
sure it does exist in some corner of the internet too.
There is a pretty good Twitter account called, I think it's called Tennessee Pol Pot, which does that whole thing. So, Marxist Leninist Calhounism. That's what we're all about here on White Guy Wednesdays. Bringing back the revolutionary spirit of the Confederate States of America. But
no.
I think just to circle back, I think it's okay to call Texas the Midwest just because they need a little bit of humbling.
We can get into that. We can get into that as we go.
Okay, well, we got it. We got a super chat here. What's this from Strom account? Actually, anti-neo-confederalism, anti-chauvinist, southern nationalist is here. There we go. So we do have
Got
anti-confederate.
a member of the fucking youth patriot org over here. It's fucking.
Going
You guys
down.
are familiar with the YPO out of Chicago in the '60s, member of the Rainbow Coalition.
The Young Patriots. Yeah.
Young Pates. Yeah.
When I was a kid, all I thought was like the Confederate battle flag was the cool flag on the Dukes of Hazzard's car. I had like a Dukes of Hazzard's car set with Boss Hogg, with what was the car had a name, but they never went through the doors.
The General Lee.
The General Lee. Jesus Christ, man! Like how?
No, but I mean, like, look at that. I mean, like, sorry, Gene. I'm so bad at being interviewed.
Oh no, go for it.
I go to host mode immediately.
Go for it. Go for it.
No, but I mean, like, I think there's something to be said about, the Dukes of Hazzard. Even I know this is the later conversation we're gonna get into, but like, like anti-cop show about the South, right? And that memory's almost completely forgotten, right? Like this was one of the most popular sort of tellings of like Southern, we call it sitcom, whatever. But the whole point was like they're just like outlaws. They hate the fucking cops and they're running and causing trouble and mischief. And now we have these bizarre things we see on people's pickup trucks. Like I love outlaw country music, and there's a blue line flag right next to it.
Brother, there used to be a radio station in this town that was called The Outlaw, and towards its end of its run, they were running. It was like 2000, probably 17 or so, running The Outlaw Backs the Blue ads.
Outlaw as a lifestyle brand. That's what it is. It's outlaw. It means you don't brush your teeth when mommy tells you.
Yeah, basically. But you respect the cops. That's what's important.
That's right.
I mean, I couldn't see the boys driving the General Lee respecting Boss Hogg, but it is what it is. But yeah, what I wanted to talk to you guys about was, a little bit of this debate that's going on. Refracted through the left about like what is Trump country, and yet David, you may wrangle under my definition of Texas as the Midwest, but Texas really is a little bit like Missouri, a kind of gateway state, right? It's a little bit of everything. Missouri's got a little bit of Yankee in it. I mean, I go to St. Louis and I'm like, this is like a European city, looks like a European city. It's got its
Maybe after the war.
I mean, it's got. I remember
I
driving
love
around.
St. Louis. I'm sorry. I love St. Louis. It's a beautiful city.
Well, I remember driving around there and thinking, like, this looks like Leeds. You know, it's got that red brick. It's got that 19th century industrial look. You go to KC, it's kind of like it's Art Deco. It's very Midwest as cities go. You come down here to the Ozarks. It's very southern. Yet, of course, historically, as many people may or may not know, this was actually the heart of Union country during the Civil War, and it was the middle of the state where you had these big plantations, and I think also in the Boot Heel, where you had
Yes.
this.
They called the Missouri River Valley Little Dixie. So actually, the northern half of the state was much more slave supporting than the southern half.
And Texas, I mean, it was in the Confederacy, but it isn't really 100% part of that, southern menu. It's got a dash of the Midwest in it. It's got a dash of the South in it, and it's got a dash of the Southwest in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got so these are like both gateway gateway states to larger cultural zones. But overall, in the story of America, especially in our era, we have this coastal population, and then we have this flyover country that is almost like a mythical land to a lot of people. I feel like a lot of Yankees coming here. It's like Lawrence of Arabia. They're coming, they're meeting these savages, and you have these two tendencies. One, obviously, which we can talk about perhaps first, is this kind of liberal perception that the Midwest, the South, the flyover country, it's the white working class. It's all white people. They're all Republicans. They're all racist. But I think the reality is a little bit more complicated than that. So, David, perhaps you want to give us up, like, how do you view, especially, we know about, there is a radical tradition, but even today, the Republican control is not as hegemonic as you might think.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. And, with Texas, I think it's difficult to talk about the state. So maybe we can sort of compartmentalize things, right? Because like there's rural parts of Texas, but a lot of people miss it. Like, Texas is like one of the more urban states in the United States, in the country. I'm from Austin, and I live in what's called the Texas Triangle, which is Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston, where the vast majority of the state lives, and they live in these kind of semi-urban, like urban or like suburban areas. And then you have a lot of the rest of the state that is more rural and also like sparsely populated. So that's one thing. But yeah, I mean, I generally, like when I talk about Texas to folks, and we do this a lot on Left Reckoning, obviously, I remind people of a couple different things. One, like that radical tradition, which you just sort of mentioned, and we could get into that if we want to, but we don't need to right now. And two, that like, yes, the Republicans run this state, and like they're going to kick the Beto's ass, and they're going to kick, for the most part, like anyone that the Texas State Democratic Party puts up on a statewide election. But remember a couple things. Like, one, the vast majority of the state doesn't vote. And even if you look at, for example, like public opinion polls, the way that the Republican Party governs the state of Texas is out of line even with their base. Like full-on abortion bans like what we have here in Texas are wildly unpopular. If you actually look at like who thinks that like there should be no exceptions for abortion or anything like that, that's not a like majoritarian position. But what you have here is a political coalition, being the Republican Party right now, that like is only interested and only worried about challenges from the far right. And that governs their political process, like what the things that they put forward, the things that they enact. So like we really, like I oftentimes say, it's like, we do have a kind of occupied government kind of thing going on in Texas right now. I think a lot of other states too, where like when you have one party rule for so long, there's not a lot of space for deviation. Because if you're a Republican who might be more of a moderate, for example, you're just going to get your ass kicked the next time you go to run for office. So like, I think that I know we're going to talk more deeply about these things. So maybe as my opening statement, I would say, like, I think sometimes it's really important to disentangle the state government from the people.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on it, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, to kind
Pat,
to echo what
you froze for a
David was
second there,
saying
Pat.
about occupied. An occupied government. It doesn't even take that long. Like Texas has been going a lot longer. Missouri used to be very purple. It used to be the purple state. It was the bellwether state in every presidential election since like Truman until Bush, I think. You know, like, and we had a Democratic governor as recently as
Jay Nixon
during the Obama administration. So it's not moving insanely to the right every day in the legislature and the laws that we're passing in this state. So yeah, I think that really drive home that it's not the people here. The vast majority of these people don't vote. And they're not as we're here as white guy representatives of the flyover country, but like you got to remember that places like St. Louis and Kansas City and Chicago and Dallas and San Antonio, these places exist and they are not that white.
Or even just like on that, like just reminding folks, like Texas is a majority minority state too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think unique to Texas versus Missouri. But like, I think a lot of times too, when people think of Texas, it's something very different from like what Texas is on the ground for people.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a kind of cartoonish image of these places and a kind of misunderstanding of how politics takes place in these places. I mean, I'm talking from, and Pat knows more about this than I do, but for example, if you look at the local government in Springfield, like Democrats might as well not run, right? It's they're not going to win.
Well, I would say local, like as the city council, I would say there's no distinguishing in this city between like a moderate Republican and a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
The Democratic Party in this city, like in this county, especially this county Democratic committee, is fairly conservative, and there's no room between the two. So there is basically this like moderate you run as a moderate Republican or you run as a far right crank,
which I think has an interesting impact on the politics in this place, because you end up with, weirdly enough, in the local government, more moderate Republicans, because you have the Chamber of Commerce Republicans who have a chunk of the Republican vote, and then all the Democrats just vote for him because they don't want to let the crazy in. So there is a weird.
You got Claire McCaskill there.
We had Claire McCaskill, lovely.
Well, she's still around, saying
she's still around. I mean, they ran.
You don't live here, not down here.
Not down here. She did have an office down here, but they, after she was booted, the person they ran next was the Anheuser-Busch heiress. That was
nice.
She didn't do very well.
No, she flopped pretty hard.
Flopped pretty hard, but like the Democratic Party doesn't really make that much of an effort in Missouri, and Democrats.
Nor do they do here.
And just.
I mean, it's a nightmare. I mean, like, sorry, not to cut you off, Gene, but like, one of the things that has been really telling and frightening as somebody, who lives here has been the kind of retreat of the Democratic Party, both on the congressional and the state level, from a lot of these parts of Texas, particularly South Texas, right? South Texas is predominantly like Hispanic. Right. And it's one of those things, classic Democrat fantasy, which like demographics are destiny, right? That like, the population of Texas is changing in one way or the other. We're just going to be able to win. Well, one, that didn't turn out to be true. And also turns out to be true that Republicans can win over those voters. And maybe I think the three of us are like anti-essentialists. So like this isn't very surprising to us, but like to them, it's like, this idea that the kind of right-wing propaganda or whatever, the political arguments that they make might also work on Hispanic Texan was like an impossibility for a lot of Democratic strategists.
Well, I mean, the Democrats, the whole demographics is destiny is just an inversion of white replacement theory, right? It's white replacement theory, but good. It's like, but it'd be a good thing if because white people are essentially bad.
But it's fundamentally passive as opposed to they don't even have a plan behind their white it's not this nefarious cabal
Oh yeah.
causing this to happen or whatever. It's Dems sitting back and saying we ain't gonna do shit because this is self-evident.
And we own those votes forever,
Yes.
basically,
that
and
entitlement.
it's disastrous for them. The Republicans have had tremendous success, and let's be clear about it. It's the Democrats are still very strong in that part of the state, but with how much of that sort of traditionally being like a blue wall, if you want to call it that, that's waning. Which means both for presidential and I think most consequentially state level elections. I mean, it's really devastating for the Democratic Party here. And it's just it's a lack of willingness to sort of look at the appeal of the Republican Party in this state. It's a lack of understanding of how people live here. Because Texas has its problems. I'm not going to come up out here and say that some kind of post-racial utopia. Far from it. But the fact is that particularly in those regions of the state, people live together. Do you know what I mean? They do the same things. They go to the same places. They eat the same food. They hang out. And, the Republican Party being able to appeal to maybe a white working class voter, why do you think that that's not ever going to appeal to somebody else in that same community? And it's just this overemphasis on race as sort of destiny or determining what people think or how they're going to vote or participate in politics that is really damaging to the Democratic Party here.
Well, the right wingers, the way I see it, often there is a kernel of truth to that critique, right? The conclusions are wrong, and often sort of the premises are pretty faulty. But when they, for example, this whole discourse of non-whites are on the Democratic Party reservation, right? Obviously, that's a pretty provocative way of putting it. But there is, as you pointed out, this kind of sense of entitlement. And frankly, I would call it a racist premise, that demographics are destiny, that they are entitled to these votes, and that people will vote along racial lines. When in fact, as you point out, the Republicans can appeal to these people, as much as people talk about white supremacy, and I'm the last person to deny that, there are white supremacist themes that go through Republican politics. It's more sophisticated than that. There is a kind of emerging new, almost like a multicultural right-wingism, which is cemented together by a very, a kind of a cultural conservatism.
We've seen this before.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've seen this before in the 19th century whenever whiteness started getting handed out to different groups that were not white to begin with. The Irish, the Italians being probably the most prominent examples. The Poles, if they ever gained whiteness.
Well, they're Catholics, so that's a
whole different thing. The Papists, that's a whole different problem to unpack. It's just a realignment in that same regard. It's whiteness is being handed out again. It's just a little bit more nuanced than it was last time around, I suppose.
Thoughts, David?
No, I mean, I think that and also particularly just because I saw some things in the chat, when we're talking about this, we're talking about South Texas and which is different from a Dallas, for example. But I'm sorry, it's just so much of Democratic Party strategy has been about avoiding real economic issues and just sort of hoping that demographic change will deliver them certain results. There was a really great investigation that the Texas Tribune did before the most recent midterms when we had our governor election, and they interviewed non-voters, which is the vast majority of people here, and I assume same in Missouri, excuse me. And they asked them about things, and look, the idea that these people are ignorant or stupid or aren't following politics is just wrong. These people were laying out very serious critiques of the banking system, of the financial system. But it was just the idea why do I need to go? And particularly in Texas, where it's hard to vote. right? Where you have to wait in line for an hour or something like that. Why waste your time for like a Beto or like the typical Democratic Party candidate? Because you've been burned before. A lot of the people they interviewed were people who might have voted for Obama in 2008, for example. And they're just like, there's nothing there for me. And this idea that like maybe some level of representation is going to work for them has fallen flat on its face because the Republicans can do that too.
Yeah, and they probably do.
They can do that too, and they do. They run, Hispanic candidates. They run Black candidates. They run people from a whole spectrum of identities and groups in this state and all across the country. The idea that the Democrats have like the sole ability to do that is just wrong-headed. It's dangerous. I mean, the results are really damaging for everyday people.
What about Missouri, Pat? What's your take on this in Missouri? Oh, has Pat frozen again? I'm telling you, the deep state.
Well, just because I was so brilliant, there's nothing else to say.
The deep state is after Patrick again.
But while we're waiting for him to come back and cut to him when he does, Gene, I do think there's an importance. Are we getting him?
We'll see. He'll log back on.
I think it's important to also make distinctions between like rural and like urban America, because like we're talking broadly, I think, about these states. And we had Keith Arell, I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong, on the show. It's a bonus episode. It'll be released to the public soon, but if you want to get it now, Left Reckoning, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. And one of the things that was really interesting with talking with him is that, like, a lot of the conversations about rural America are almost all cultural. And very rarely do we talk about the economic factors that rural America has been facing in this country. And, if you look at the economic history, like the political economy of rural America, I mean, it has been completely devastated. For a long time, working, like the city, the town near you was like the place you went to spend your money. Now it's the place that you go to work in. You've seen a decline in manufacturing and industrial work for a lot of people. And there's a lot of frustration and anger that comes with it. And if you don't have a kind of political movement that can speak to that, then it becomes really easy to blame migration and cultural change, social change on your problems. And I think that's just like a really important thing to keep in your head as like socialists who might want to see a different kind of politics when they're thinking maybe about rural America, which is distinct from like Midwest or flyover country or the South.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make, because, we allied all these kind of parts of Midwestern society into like one culturally homogeneous thing. But you've got your big cities, you've got your small cities, you've got your suburban areas, and then you've got your rural districts. And, people in those societies, like they had, they have like very logical reasons to like distrust Democrats and support Republicans. Why would you support a political party that despises you, right?
And like very clearly they do despise them. I just don't think that that's controversial to say at this point. I think it's been explicit for a while.
What do you think, Pat?
I think it's got to be frustrating to be one of those flyover Democrats in office. I think of like our minority speaker, minority leader, Crystal Quaid. Like, what's it got to be someone who's in leadership of a party of a state like this, to just be left out to dry, like day in and day out by the national party apparatus, just to be thrown under the bus left and right, and to be trying, I'll give this particular woman credit, like work your ass off to build a coalition to try to do something in this state, but never be able to come up more than short because you don't have the resources to do it.
And also the Democrats don't have a program, right? Like, that's the problem, and we've discussed this with David before, is that, a lot of the left is, look into the Democratic Party as a vehicle in these places to actualize change. But perhaps, the Democratic Party can't. It's not only it isn't the vehicle, but it's just incapable of being that.
I also think they're just uninterested in it.
Yeah, it's incapable of being that vehicle because it doesn't want to be a vehicle for.
Well, what I mean, but like think about it like on like pure cynical level, like what is Biden's Southern strategy, right? What helps him out in Georgia? What was their strategy in Texas? It is trying to win over wealthier suburban voters who are disgusted with Trump's antics, right? And if that becomes like the class that you're trying to appeal to, then like, doing economic populism or, Lord help us, like socialism or social democracy kind of policies, that's not on the agenda, right? These guys are tyrants for the most part, right? They run their little small business. They don't want big government saying that people should have water breaks. They don't want things like saying people should have sick leave, right? So there's very little appetite from the National Democratic Party, at least, to like run or appeal or to deliver for these kind of groups that are sort of left out, because they've done the calculation that they think that like basically if we continue to pick up wealthy suburban voters and hold the urban centers that we already have, we can start winning elections both on the national and on the state level. And it's something that's it's disastrous because like I don't even want to talk about it, how effective it is in maybe winning a presidential election or state level election. But in terms of policy, I mean, what does that mean? If your base is the wealthy and the professional class, like you're never going to deliver for the working class, right? And is it surprising that we've seen so much class de-alignment in the past decade? Matt Karp has a really great piece where he goes in depth on this about how traditional blue collar communities who might have gone stronger for the Democratic Party have switched. And we talk a lot about like the changes in the American economic system over the past 30, 40 years. But this is really recent and really relevant. And there is a refusal. I mean, I know between the three of us, we're all willing to have this conversation. But there's a lot of people, and on the left, I'm using the broad term, so I'm including libs in this, right? Forgive me. But like they don't want to have that conversation about why they're losing these people. Instead, they would rather tell themselves bedtime stories just like, oh, all these ignorant hicks out there are just, so racist and they can't handle seeing, people of color or different groups of people in positions of power. So therefore they're going to the right. Which I don't think is a very, very good way to like sort of wrestle with the fact that in states like Minnesota, they're like traditionally Republican voting areas are now voting Democrat, and traditional Democratic voting areas are voting Republican.
Well, what's your take then, Pat? So, we have this kind of like mythology about these, like everybody's a hick and they're all racist and things like that. But let's drill down to it. Like you followed this politics on Hoot and Holler a lot. What is the base? I mean, Springfield inside and out. What is the base of the Republican Party in Springfield? Who are the Republican Party? And is it really this working class party? Because I don't think it is.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a working class party, because I would say largely in Springfield, the working class doesn't vote. I mean, you look at participation rates of like, I think it's like 48% or some shit like that during a presidential year on like a good.
Again, the deep state strikes Pat.
The deep state's coming.
The deep state's coming to strike
year,
Pat.
A Trump year or a first term Obama year.
Oh no, you're back.
No, you're here.
You're good.
I'm back. I'm just saying people don't vote. The working class largely doesn't vote. The people who do vote generally are more invested in the community through their ties to business and social clubs, etc. And those are the people who decide local elections. Those are the people who decide our statewide elections. I don't think that the Republican Party delivers for the working class ever, but the Democrats leave a lane that the rhetoric is allowed to flourish for people like Josh Hawley or JD Vance to come in and claim that they support the working class while, supporting their donors left and right, like with the rail safety bill that JD Vance was backing recently.
So who is the MAGA chud? You know, like when we talk about the
I
MAGA
mean,
church.
they exist. Do not get me. I work with several, and I have worked with the many more. They certainly do exist.
But what do they think? Like, oh man, I'm
They
sorry.
they may be working class. They're dyed in the wool. I don't know. They come in all different class and all different size, all different income. Some of the chuddiest.
Like, I guess what I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, go
I'm
ahead.
I shouldn't be asking questions.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask a question. It's a safe space.
Like, okay, but like, or we like, I think everyone out here knows like the petty bourgeois theory of like the Republican Party, but like, I'm more interested in sort of like getting to the nuts and bolts of like maybe the working class group. I'm not even saying that that's the majority,
Sure.
but like, what do they think? What do they care about?
Man, they're pilled to the gills as far as I can tell. Like for
Yeah.
the most part, the ones that are like talking about it, open conversation with not in like certain they're in an in group kind of talking about it in public kind of people are just pilled to the fucking gills. I don't know if that's the internet. I don't know if that's Fox News. A combination of I know it's the internet because I'm listening to what they're saying. But
Well, the culture war is international. A lot of these like right-wing talking points, you don't just get them in the Midwest. You get them around the world with socially conservative people. There is this kind of. I like the way that Patrick is frozen on the screen. He looks so happy.
Yeah, he does look
You,
happy.
you, do-
I'm
you,
like, he's back now.
yeah. So you have this kind of you have this kind of culture war discourse that is always going on, and it's like it's replicated in different places. And yeah, in the absence of a politics that speaks to people's like visceral self-interest.
Then it's wage war. It's wage war on the enemies, right? And like what the Republican Party does is they create these enemies, and I think I don't think it's wrong to say that it is bigoted and hateful or whatnot, but it's effective in the absence of something else, right? It's like, look at JD Vance, right? A guy who's always sort of presenting himself as like the tribune of the working class. I mean, this is a guy who recently was supporting a bunch of pro railroad company policies, right? Despite him being the guy who's supposed to be the voice of these workers in Ohio. There's a punitive aspect to politics. I don't think it's a good thing. I'm not celebrating this, but like there's things like my life is rough. Fuck the doctors and the lawyers. This is gonna piss them off, and I'm gonna support this guy. I don't think that like what I think is really important in sort of recognizing these tendencies is not a source of like, oh, what the left should do is to start to tail the right wing.
I think that
But
there is
that's such a weak pleasure. Do you know what I mean? Like that's such a weak pleasure. It doesn't deliver anything to you. It's like a little bit of mental like, and I don't think we need to even make the like people who are like really engaged and interested in this kind of thing like the focus of left politics either. But just understand it's like the value of doing that only happens when there's nothing else really available in politics.
right. It does seem that there are people on the left who, yeah, like understandably, who in response to the kind of high-handed approach of people towards people in the Midwest, or like this perception of what people are like in the Midwest, they just go the other way and then fetishize everything about social conservatism. And so they want to I don't like the whole red brown rhetoric, so I'm not trying to accuse people of being red brown. I'm just saying you have this liberal conservative divide replicated on the left, and it just comes to define our politics, whereas we can't really get out of it, as it were, that we end up playing defense and then having these same debates that liberals and conservatives are having, except in a kind of like leftist space, safe space, which I just don't think is at all I don't think is at all helpful. And my critique, I guess my position would be, you know, the Democratic brand in these places is toxic. But it's toxic not because not because people are stupid. Like, I think there's this perception. These people are stupid. They've all been brainwashed. They don't really know what their material interests are.
Yeah.
And it's
the worst take.
It's so, like, they're laboring under this false consciousness. But it's like, no, they hate the Democratic Party, like, for totally, like, rational reasons. It gets into weird conspiracy theory areas, obviously, but there are reasons for it. It wasn't under, it was under Clinton that all this stuff shut down. I mean, I don't know about in Springfield, Patrick, but like, there used to be industry here, right?
There used to be some industry here. There used to be trains. God damn it, bring them back. There used to be a rail hub. Yeah, there used to be. There still is industry here. Springfield's not particularly deindustrialized. I mean, as far as cities its size in the Midwest goes, it's doing okay as far as industry goes.
You got tracker boats.
But I will apologize for my connection, because one stereotype about flyover country is true. The infrastructure sucks ass.
See, we've been cursed though here, because like we have decent Wi-Fi, but it means that the homes aren't affordable for anyone anymore. So
That's
pick your poison.
The bad the bad internet is probably what saves house prices in Springfield, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know that it's holding for much longer. Rent has skyrocketed over the last decade. It's kind of nuts looking at that trend line.
But yeah, I mean, these places are all suffering from the same, like, problems that other places are, and people have a very one-dimensional view of these societies. Like, and I think the approach of Democrats and liberals has tended to be this kind of just disdain. They just don't trust people. They don't trust. They don't. They just don't believe people are smart, and that they have to be told what to do. But we know, like, for example, during the Great Plague that struck, there were certain high-level government institutions that told porky pies about, for example, masks, right? And they may have had a good reason. They didn't want the mask supply to run down. But then, obviously, when they start changing that advice, well, who's going to trust them?
No, they lie. I think they
lied to people.
I mean, when they told people it wasn't effective, and then they said it was, because they didn't trust people. I mean, that's a big deal, I think.
Yeah, and that was so early. It seeded so much doubt. I mean, it's pretty upsetting. I mean, you've just seen that across the board over the last, I mean, especially like the last decade. It seems like the way that these trust and institutions is just deteriorating across the board, and we're kind of losing our mooring, probably. It's maybe that's a revolutionary moment. I don't know, but on the other hand, it is just kind of a surreal, uncanny time to be alive, because nobody believes anything anymore.
Right. And I think this also has problems for labor unions as well, because, labor unions, or at least the ones who are tied to the Democratic Party, they get tarred with the stink of that, right? So that's another problem that's coming. Now, why labor unions might lean towards the Democrats makes sense, because there are, material incentives. The Democrats tend to be slightly, although very slightly, more favorable to organized labor. But, the reward that unions get for supporting the Democrats is not really comparable to that cost, especially in places like that, like Missouri, where I think people see a lot of institutions, labor unions, universities, education, as becoming arms of the Democratic Party, which I think hampers organizing for some different type of politics. I think it's a conundrum, but it's a lot of these institutions we might see as positive become tarred with the kind of negative brand Like people.
I mean, I talked to some of my labor friends here, you know, people who are, you know, members and agitate for things. It's like, you know, regularly endorsing Democrat failure politicians. They wonder, how good is this for us, right? Is this helping us out at all, right? Because it just means that when the Republican wins here, they're going to be more committed than ever, you know, to waging war against the institutions that sort of went against them in that election. And I think that, like, you know, we have to be really clear here about the Democratic Party. It's like on like two levels, because like there's this ultra position, right, where like there's a refusal to recognize that, like, yeah, you know what, like your middle of the road Democrat probably isn't going to do, like, for example, what's happening here right now. They just signed, my governor Greg Abbott just signed HB 2127, which is going to basically outlaw local politics in the state. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Like, straight up, if you pass any law on anything that the Texas State Code addresses, it is null and void. And what that means practically is things like water breaks for workers in a state that, I mean, it's 105 degrees right now here. The sun set an hour ago. It's 105 degrees here. Water breaks, no, going away. Right, like, so, like, let's be clear about, like, you know, what the Republicans means for working people. It's like bad, but at the same time, recognizing that the Democrats aren't very interested in doing much more than that, right? They might not be aggressive in the sense to take away water break, you know, local policies or something like that. You know, but I'm sorry, like, not to be like a one-tune fiddle or anything like that, but it's just, in American politics, can be sort of exhausting sometimes, because you're constantly sort of caught in this kind of loser's battle of saying, like, oh, well, these guys are worse than the other guys, and that's sort of it. And recognizing, you know, and like, it's difficult to sort of recognize a way, or plot out a way to get out of this conundrum, wherein, you know, the California has been dominated by Democrats for a long time. New York has been dominated by Democrats for a long time. Are those workers' paradises? No. Right. So, like, you know, like, your level of commitment to that grouping and that political party has to be limited.
Patrick, thoughts?
Just as a contrast, though, you have places like Minnesota where this year, just in eking out a barely have a fucking minority or majority in their state legislature, they are trying to build a fucking workers' utopia, kind of, it sounds like.
But what happened with their governor? He blocked, like, he put forward one of the nastiest, he blocked one of, like, the you know, like, this bill that was supposed to, like, help ride share and gig workers in the state. No, I'm sorry, Pat. I'm not trying to contradict you.
No.
I'm just sort of saying, like, there's a horizon.
Yeah, absolutely.
There, like, Minnesota is like the example that we're given right now. But I think it's really important to recognize that in Minnesota, what happened there was that, like society in general got really mobilized on these things, that the party in power had to answer those.
Sure.
And you don't just get that without the other.
No, and I mean, well earned, the you know, the capital.
Poor Pat. Every time he tries to make a point,
I feel bad,
the deep state tries to liquidate him. They're trying to silence him. It's probably because all this talk of water breaks, and they don't want to give Pat a water break, so he'll starve to death. Oh, he's back. He's back. Sorry, Patrick. Oh, poor Patrick.
Might be refreshing. No, but, like, I mean, while he's reloading, I mean, this, you know, Gina, you and I talk about this offline too. It's just like, it's not an easy question, but yeah, let's get Pat in.
Yeah, go for it, Pat.
Well,
Go.
I don't even know what the hell we're talking about because I keep cutting out. This is miserable. I'm so sorry, guys.
That's a lot of professionalism to come in and out from.
No, I'm proud.
Like
I'm proud of Patrick's staying power. Go for it, Pat. Go for it,
Let's
Patrick.
talk about country music because Gene hates it. Can I?
Yeah, let's
do
talk
that?
about
do
country
it.
music.
I actually I need you here for this, Pat. So let's
So
please
yeah,
do that.
I hate country music. It sounds terrible. Yeah, Patrick came on just to attack me over my hatred for country music. I'm sorry, I don't like it. Defend country music. It all sounds like they're singing about 9/11, pickup trucks, and
Well,
I
that's
mean,
if you listen to anything after 9/11, there's a higher propensity that you're going to get 9/11
That's true.
and pickup trucks. Like there's very little empire building in country music before 2001. I'm not saying it
so
doesn't exist, but
is country music a revolutionary genre?
oh man, I don't think it has to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like I can make that argument if you like push me to it,
Mm.
but I think I think sometimes leftists are annoying with culture too. Like it has to sort
Look,
of.
I'm just saying I don't like country music. You guys are welcome to like it.
Well, I mean, like, look, Gene. I mean, like, no one's gonna fault you for having bad taste. But no, I mean, like, country music is like in a lot of ways is the music of the people in this country. And maybe I should correct that. Like, of some people, of a certain way of living, it is like an art form that is extremely accessible. I'm a bit of a musician myself. That's the style of music that I play. I grew up not to get sappy about this or anything like this, but like, I grew up with a single mother without having a father. Like, I learned a lot of lessons from people like Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings. I like it.
Patrick, defend country music. Tell me it's not all just like dudes wailing about their trucks.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of wailing about women too, and there's lots of women wailing about men. It's a powerful form of nostalgia. I think country music really took off like starting in like the 1930s, around the time that the Great Migration started. It's not for country people, or at least it wasn't. That's maybe changed more recently. But what it's for is for formerly people from the country who moved to the city. I mean, that's at least in its earliest pop iterations. That's why it was getting radio play, is because people moved into cities where there were radios, and those people had lived in the country, and now there was this shiny new form of music that sounded a little bit like the old time, and a little bit like the bluegrass, a little bit like the stuff that they would play at the church. And so it has that holding power still to this day, I think, with its nostalgia, for good or ill. I think there have been revolutionaries who've played the music. I think Chris Christopherson is a great example of that. Chris is one of the all-time greats. I think underappreciated. Just wrote a lot of bangers. And then you have modern guys who are, dare I say, woke, like Garth Brooks being the biggest example of that. Fucking king. I love Garth. He's a big old lib, but we love him in our hearts. And, you got like Sturgill Simpson and Tyler Childers and the Drive-By Truckers, which is Southern rock. But
yes, please.
Oh, he mentioned the Drive-By Truckers,
but it's country music nonetheless. Output to some degree, you know what I'm saying?
So,
well, like, let me just say something really fast, Gene, if I could. Because I actually would love to hear your thoughts on this, Pat, too, about some of the more modern stuff. Let me just do two things, if that's okay.
Go for it.
One is the first bit is every single radical country musician had to go up against the record companies. And that is like the history of country music, from Willie to Waylon to a lot of people today. And there was a consolidation in music that I think happened after 9/11 that I think made it worse and also made it way more conservative. But without even jumping into that, like, here's my quick elevator pitch on like the greats of country music and like the progressive bona fides. Johnny Cash, he grew up on a New Deal homestead that was put forward for poor people in Arkansas to get by. He sang yes for Richard Nixon, but you know what song he sang for him? He sang his song "What Is Truth," and if you're not familiar with that song, it's a song about the youth sort of asking the elders and the people in society, "What is truth?" Right? It was a very radical song, and that's like, so whatever. He played for the president, but he sang the most radical song in his repertoire for him. But look, he's not even the most radical. Willie Nelson is a huge supporter of Leonard Peltier, one of the founding members of the American Indian movement. So much so that when he goes and plays shows up north, Yankee cops in Boston would boycott his shows and would protest outside of it. Willie's been a supporter of farmers and the SEIU for as long as I can remember. Waylon Jennings, at the height of his career, when he was probably one of the most popular musicians in the country, would regularly sing songs on the Native American reservations across the country for free. Um, I'm forgetting his heritage, but he's Native American, as is Willie, by blood. And Chris Christopherson, as Pat mentioned, Chris Christopherson literally has a song called Sandinistas, where he sings the praise
and it
of
bangs.
the
It's a good one too,
and it's a good song. Because here's the thing that does drive me nuts about country music is like there's this trend now. People always be like, "Oh, you got to listen to this guy. He's like a radical country musician." Right. And I'm not talking about the good guys like Childers and Sturgill and all this. Like, just be some fucking dude doing the most like Nashville sound country music ever. And they just sing progressive slogans over it. That's trash.
yeah.
But there's a lot of really great musicians that we should probably go into right now who are doing it. And like, look, is it a mix? Oh, actually, last one I'll say. Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard is probably the most controversial out of all of like the greats, the Mount Rushmore of outlaw country music. Jacobin magazine published one of the worst pieces they've ever published after Merle Haggard died by some person, and I shouldn't make it so
probably a Yankee, probably
100% a Yankee. I'm getting worked up because Merle Haggard wrote this song, "An Okie from Muskogee."
Well, that's the wrong song to get mad about.
Which is the wrong song to get mad about, too. Yeah, there's other ones out
side
there.
of me that you should be mad about.
The fighting side of me, I totally agree. I think that's the one that's the least defensible. But Okie from Muskogee was it was a parody song. It was funny. It was goofy. It was becoming the guy who's at the honky tonk, who is this like kind of red-blooded, super patriotic American, and joking around about him. And then, of course, it became a #1 hit. And then he could never say anything bad about it ever.
The tell that it's satire is that he calls himself an Okie in it. Whenever no self-respecting Oklahoman would call themselves an Okie, it was a California slur for Oklahomans.
100% true. But also even with Merle, and I'm not even trying to say that, like, I think Merle like actually really documented a lot of like working class feelings in America. Like, one thing that pisses liberals off is he has a line that's like, "I ain't never been on welfare," right? And everyone's like, "Oh, that's anti-solidaristic." But like, look, I think this maybe is conservative of me, but like in the absence of like building like social democracy or socialism, like we want like, yeah, there's a lot of value, for example, in like trying to be self-sufficient because no one's going to help you, right? And that's the secondary to this fact that where does Merle Haggard come from? Merle Haggard was one of the prisoners in the prison where Johnny Cash played his very famous prison concert. And when Merle Haggard became famous, there was harrowing stories of a mass gravesite that were found at a prison in Arkansas, where the warden, they were just straight up killing people and burying them in the ground and treating them like they didn't matter or didn't exist. And what did Merle Haggard do? He made that into a big fucking deal. And he never stopped advocating for prisoners and prisoners' rights. So no, it's not saying that all these guys are like closet communists or radicals or anything like this, but the project of turning this music and this genre into like this bastion of conservatism is ahistorical.
Yeah, a number of people mentioned him in the chat, so I just want to shout out Steve Earle, who's one of the
I feel embarrassed.
Yeah, he's a little bit later than those guys, but he's definitely one of the outlaw greats.
I mean, the parallel is with something like hip hop, right? You know, hip hop had its hip hop radicals, but you know, as it became mainstream, as it became more corporatized, it just became a lot of reactionary claptrap. Don't get me wrong, I like my gangs. I mean, my opposition to country music is not like I hate country people. It's not a sound I like, right? It's aesthetics. It's like I don't like that sound. I don't like Sean Berg either. So like whatever. I'm a Philistine. But gangster rap, like is full of reactionary themes, right? It's full of like petty bourgeois, lumpen themes, but that doesn't mean that it's like doesn't have a radical tradition in it. It doesn't mean that's all that defines that particular genre. But obviously, with corporatization of music, and you kind of hinted at this, you have this consolidation into country music. I mean, Pat, Pat, Pat perhaps knows more about this than I do. Like at one point, Springfield was a big center of country music, competing with Nashville, and then it wasn't. But these things consolidate. And as they consolidate, they want to market them to the biggest demographic, right? With hip hop became the music for middle class white kids. That's you turn on MSNBC, the fact that Ari Melba talks about like hip hop all the time, and usually gangster rap hip hop, tells you something about that. And again, with the country music, that this kind of flag, pickup truck, and woman is like a commercialization of what is a sophisticated genre without tendencies, with different tendencies.
I mean, some of the best songs in the genre were written about flags, pickup trucks, and women. Let's be clear.
That's true.
Yeah, totally.
Some of the best hip hop songs are about gangster stuff, like the best dance hall songs. So, I mean, David will know this. Back in the day, Michael's favorite music was like dance hall about like murdering gay people. It's like, whoa, it's a bit. I'm like, that's a little bit heavy. He's like, they got the machine gun sound and killed the Batman. And it's like, that's a pretty bad message, but it's a banging dance tune. People are going to drop it like it's hot.
I'll just say this about the cliche of country music being my dog died and my truck broke down and whatever. I borrow this from Norm Macdonald, who I think has a great line. It's like, well, that's real life. You know what I mean? It's like that's real life. It's like there's fucked up shit that happens to you, and some being able to put that to words in music, I think is good.
Well, there was in the early 1920s, when after the Soviet Union was established, the Kurdish minority in the Soviet Union, they gave them these like cultural rights and a radio station, and they were recording the music, and they wanted to record the traditional Kurdish music, but they said you can't sing about the aghas, the like landlords, and you can't sing about the God. And it's like, well, that's like literally all the songs are about, because that's like so all that was left was like hokey love songs, as opposed to like the different themes. But it does feel like it does feel to me that like mainstream, the popification of so many genres, like I don't believe culture has a revolutionary capacity. I think culture is reflective. I don't think anyone is going to pick up a gun because they listen to like, I don't know, Immortal Techniques, and now they're going to fight for the Sandinistas. It can be reflective, but I think it's interesting how the horizons of like mainstream music just become like, people love Taylor Swift. I'm sure her music is really nice. Is that country music? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's so like it's very bland. Like music, a lot of music feels very bland.
The worst thing that's happening in country music right now is the drum track. I feel like Pat would agree. Like the radio level country music is
the fucking like, hick hop trend.
Hick hop, and like that to me, like I'll defend country music from a lot of allegations on other levels, but like that to me is just like white people not being comfortable listening to hip-hop.
Man, you got to go full Bubba Sparks or you don't go at all. You got to go full Paul Wall or you don't go at all.
I agree. But like, look, I'll just say this. Willie Nelson would never have been Willie Nelson if he hadn't come back home to Texas and gone to Austin. And the people who were doing that before him, people like Billy Joe Shaver, who like I can tell you amazing stories about. Billy Joe Shaver was like the dude, missing a finger from working, when he first got famous, he went to Willie Nelson's July 4th picnic, and he played a set, and there was this drunk guy in the front row who happened to be Waylon Jennings. And this guy Waylon, who's drunk as fuck, is like, man, you gotta come up and see me in Nashville, and we'll record an album. And Billy Joe Shaver says, all right. And he shows up to Nashville a month later, whatever, shows up to Waylon Jennings' recording studio, walks in, and some big biker guy is sort of like, you can't get in. And he's like, no, Waylon said I could get in. And the guy refuses him, and then he's just persistent. So he goes back and talks to Waylon, and then he comes out with $100 bill and this folded up real nicely and hands it to him and says, Waylon says he can't see you today, but sorry for your troubles. And Billy Joe Shaver says, why don't you take this, put it up your ass, and twist it? The guy let him in, and then Waylon Jennings played. Billy Joe Shaver sits in front of Waylon Jennings, and he goes, he says, play me one song. If I don't like it, you're done. If I like it, you can play another. And if I like that song, you can play another. And Billy Joe Shaver goes on to play Ain't No God in Mexico and a few other songs. And that became an album of Waylon Jennings, which I think went platinum. So there's something about those guys that they just sort of like pushed up against the wall of what was possible. Townes Van Zandt, obviously an amazing artist who got a start in Austin. I'm sorry. I'm reminiscing about my favorite guys.
Taking a trip down heart-worn highways over here.
This is a great documentary.
It is. It's fantastic.
Guy Clark is in it. Steve Earle's in it. Townes, obviously. Yeah.
I mean, this is Patrick's dream, is to have the country radio show on KSMU radio, right? That's
right.
That's the long term. That's the long term.
That's the long term goal. For after we turn our history show into a morning zoo show, then I take over the nighttime country radio slot.
Yeah, I think
maybe it's something about that time period or whatever. But like, I think what really for me is so special about country music is it's just like guys like us. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, these guys are way more talented than all of us. But they're just people who are able to sort of, achieve something exceptional and create art. And they're guys who, if you saw them on the street, you wouldn't think that this guy is just, an out of this world artist or has this internal dialogue that would mesmerize you, like a Townes Van Zandt or something like that. And that's the appeal. But, I know, Gene, when you walk around the street, you might not feel that way about the folks you're walking by. But
I mean,
maybe you should.
Maybe I should. Maybe.
We need to put you on a diet. We need to make you a playlist with some John Prine, some Townes. We need to get you real sad. Do you have the propensity to be sad?
I don't think I have the propensity to be sad, but maybe I can sad myself up with some country music. I listen. If I want to be sad, I listen to some Gugoosh.
Howie, I do love Gagoosh, brother.
I did listen to some sad. I actually had to stop playing it because it makes us all cry. And I'm like, why are you crying? He's like, the music is sad. And it's like, okay, we won't play that. It's sad. Why are they sad? And I was like, I don't know, son. She's a very sad lady. She sings a lot of sad songs, but it comes down to where you come from, right? It's like you say, it's like nostalgia. It's I don't know. I guess I have nostalgia for 90s Britpop, I suppose.
Yeah.
But like as with everything, as it becomes corporatized, it gets shitified, right? It becomes
absolutely.
It's like, look. Just look at the movie industry. We're living in a world where they're making remakes today of films that for my generation would have been films from like 1930, it's like everything gets recycled, and that happens with music. So, I'm not wanting to, I don't want people to think that my dislike of country music is some kind of, I don't like the music of the white of the colonizer and stuff like I hate folk music in general. So, I'm more of a EMD kind of guy, maybe.
I think that is one of its great selling points, is that it is an American folk music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, country music is up there with jazz and hip hop, like the most American music. I mean, it's not just American. It's obviously takes its influences from all over the place, and obviously Mexico has a thriving country music scene of its own. That's a totally.
Yeah, that's what you told me. I was like, what? What you?
Well, I
told
mean, banda norteña. These are like very close to country music. They're very closely related. They come out of similar traditions. I mean, you know, cowboys and vaqueros were side by side.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's also another thing, is because of this perception that the Midwest was conquered by, you know, it was just white people who came to the Midwest. There was like all kinds of people who came to the Midwest to make a living. So Jean did ecstasy in university. That is a slanderous thing to say. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I don't mean to dog on it, but there is a snobbery towards
Whatever. I'd rather less weirdos be at the shows in general. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'll just say this. I'd be curious to hear if Pat has any suggestions, but like, you know, a couple folks who are making really good music that, like, again, like, I do not like explicitly political country music just in general. I like country music that might be left wing because, like, the person, you know, has those views. One of my favorite people to listen to, I see him every time I can here in Austin, Croy and the Boys, really incredible. Union man, union IBW member, and like incredible good left wing songs about like gentrification, about state things, but also just like good fuck around and honky tonk sound songs. Sturgill Simpson obviously is a king. I know I'm really forgetting people who I really like. I'm trying to think more on left wing politically.
Well, who do you like, Pat? Who's your go-to guy in Springfield? Oh,
I got to shout out Nick Shoulders from Northwest Arkansas, country music. Nick Shoulders, Dylan Earl,
Yes,
Willie Carlisle. Nick Shoulders, though, is the goddamn truth, man. It like sounds like Slim Whitman. He warbles, he yodels, he does all the very folky things, and it sounds so goddamn beautiful. I love Nick Shoulders. You should check him out.
You know, Willie Carlisle, you just mentioned him. You were a little mumbled, but Willie Carlisle is out of this fucking world.
Yeah, Willie's great.
Last Magician might be one of my favorite songs that's been written the past decade.
Nice.
No, and
yeah,
like
Northwest Arkansas.
Arkansas has been producing, man. I will just say this: if people are like interested in checking out, you know, kind of younger or like more non-big contract musicians, Western AF and Gemstones on VHS are two YouTube channels that do really great music videos for a lot of up-and-coming country musicians. It is a gold mine of incredible folks out there if you haven't checked it out before.
there you go. Well, we are at 1 hour and 14 minutes, and I want to thank David and I want to thank Pat for coming on and talking to us about life in flyover country. I mean, like, to be fair, I'm not the best people, even though I live here. I think the majority of Pat knows where I live. So like the majority of my life is spent between my office and my house, which is
not very far apart.
Yeah, which are not very far apart. It's like it's my house, my office, Costco, the Aldi's on Sunshine, and Meta Games. Those are like the only places I ever go. Oh, and also Menards. I do like to go and look at Menards, to go around there and see what kind of things I can get in Menards. But that's about it. That's all I know about Springfield. I don't know. So I'm very bad at being a Midwesterner.
That's not true. You're very good at going to buffets, and if that is
that's true.
One,
I am very.
Dean, what do you drive right now too? I feel like you've imbibed the culture.
I do drive but my pickup truck is so small. It's I
Sorry,
feel,
son, you've been colonized.
I'm like, I park.
You're from Britain. You're not that doesn't come out of nowhere. You don't buy a pickup truck from home.
No, the reason I put the story behind my pickup truck is actually like one of my friends in the university, like who was working here when I got hired, his wife was selling their pickup truck, and so I bought their pickup truck off them, and I still have it, and it's pretty beat up. The the handle on one of the doors has come off, so it's a real pain in the butt to open. And yeah, it works still. It works still, and I can still drive around with my pickup truck. Yeah, I do drive a pickup truck, and
There you go.
it's a Colorado Chevy. I do want a Ram though, because it has bigger wheels and more capacity to have things in the back of the truck. Because like after having a truck, you can't really go back. You know, it's like I can't go back to try and stick things in the back. I mean, of a car. I mean, Pat had this very practical Volvo, which
Yeah, it was very practical until it was on the side of the road permanently.
and so yeah, I was like, no, I want my pickup truck, and me and Zal have talked about the possibility of getting a monster truck in the future, or maybe a borderline monster truck. You know, like one of those ones which is near a monster truck. But yeah, like I'm totally down with the pickup truck.
There you go.
That's a good utility vehicle. It's pragmatic.
We're winning him over, Pat.
That's right.
But people in the Middle East have pickup trucks. Like you've seen,
They drive Hiluxes there.
they have those like the ISIS Toyota.
That's right.
The Hilux, right?
Greatest goddamn pickup truck ever made, to be honest.
I mean, those like you take a bunch of methamphetamines and drive for 6 hours, you can conquer Mosul. So so that's where I am with the Midwest. So I would say I appreciate all you can eat buffets in the Midwest and pickup trucks. So maybe I am assimilating.
You're halfway there, man. You're halfway there.
I mean, come on, man. Like people always dogging on Golden Corral, but like it's just. I mean, last time we went to me and Pat went to the Hill, the Italian all you can eat.
Italian all you can eat, which is that was a novel concept for me.
This is what's awesome out in Missouri. It's like they found a way to make Italian food redneck there too.
That's right.
It's so good.
That's right.
It's pretty good though. It's like, come on, that all you can eat Italian buffet is. I mean, the one I don't go to is Pizza Ranch. That's pretty bad. But yeah, like the all you can eat or ride or die boo. Yeah, exactly.
It's not even the areas like most redneck Italian place. We've got a Paschetti's down in Branson that is probably the most fucking garish place that I've ever stepped foot in.
Well, the one place I haven't dared go to is that Mexican chain that they have. What's it called?
Yeah, Mexican Villa. Where
Mexican.
You don't have the stomach for it.
Well,
as a Texan, like thinking about Missouri.
Well, the thing is,
dark.
the thing is with Mexican Villa, it's like, you know, when they advertise the food, they have like a picture and it's usually like a nice picture. The picture that they've chosen to put up of their food on Mexican Villa, it's like, who'd eat this? You know, like.
All right, I trust that place now.
You've heard of Tex-Mex? Well, now Mizmex.
Mizmex. It looks like a war crime on food.
The goofiest thing I've ever experienced is people from Arkansas who I've met have like this real, like it's a one-sided rivalry, which is really funny to me.
With Missouri?
Arkansas.
Oh.
Ark-Mex versus Tex-Mex, which is so fucking funny to me. It's like, nah, like I know that shit is trash. And no one in
I don't know, man. There's a lot of Tyson Chickens plants in Arkansas. I've had some very good
in Texas. No one has ever thought about Ark-Mex, but like they have like essays written about Ark-Mex versus Tex-Mex in like their big newspapers and shit. And I do like reading them.
Have you guys ever eaten a raccoon? I think that's something.
A raccoon? No, I've had squirrel.
Yeah, I've had plenty of squirrel, but like in raccoons, like a big Arkansas thing, they make them eat it. Like Bill Clinton ate it, Hillary Clinton ate it. They have a big like political event. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Nothing with an opposable thumb for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good moral position to take.
Yeah, that's good. I actually found a dead possum and a dead raccoon in my garden. I don't know what's been going on in there.
Dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, yeah, that's a good way of doing it. I suppose you could just drive, hit a deer, and I had a teaching assistant.
It's legal to harvest the deer that you've hit in Missouri. Yeah.
I had a teaching assistant who hunted, and he gave me some venison, as we call it, in the UK. I don't know what you chaps call it, but it was pretty good. So you have
Okay.
stew. This thing does happen in Britain as well. There was a TV series called Britain's Toughest Villages, which is on YouTube, and it has the one guy who like goes around and collects the roadkill off and eats it. And I kind of feel that that's kind of generalized in the United States. I feel like people are eating roadkill, but I'm not going to judge. Protein is protein. Yeah.
There we go.
Well, guys, David, anything to plug before we call it a night?
Check out Left Reckoning if you're not already listening to it.
What's coming on Left Reckoning soon?
So we just had a really big episode yesterday. We talked about HB 2127, which is this new law that's basically outlawing local politics in the state. I have two things cooking in Jacobin, one on that bill and another one on the history of the Southern Tenant Farmers Union in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. So keep your eye out for that. Bonus episode, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We're diving into comic books, which is neither Matt or mine.
Who are you diving into it with?
Boxer Brown, who is a incredible cartoonist and writer. He writes a lot about weed policy, but he has this really great book about nostalgia and how these big corporations have commodified it over the past 100 years in the United States. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I have to admit, I went a little skeptical. Very interesting history. So check that out. It'll be up on Sunday for patrons. So.
Oh, nice. Hey, and I think here I found you a new person to do some podcasting about like your hick music.
Yes, for sure.
So, does Matt listen to that kind of music?
No, Matt does not. Matt is like a true North Dakotan. I don't want to take anything away from it, but I think culturally Matt was preparing himself for a move to New York City for a long time.
Fair enough. Escape from the deep north. And of course, Patrick and you can catch us on KSMU Radio on the first Thursday of every month. And also, I think we managed to get it onto.
We're on
Apple.
Podbean now, so we should be everywhere, except for maybe Apple for another week or so. You know how long it takes sometimes to get up on Apple.
But we got some. What have we got in the can?
We've talked about China's one-child policy. We talked about the civil war along the borderlands, and next month we're talking about hunter-gatherer societies.
We've got hunter-gatherer societies. We also we've got ancient aliens in the mix. We're doing a show on ancient aliens and also Roman Twitter.
Hell yeah.
We're going to do about Roman Twitter, which is just people writing on the wall. But it's kind of, I guess it's the same function. Probably slightly more user-friendly than Twitter is these days. But I mean, I don't know what's going on Twitter. It's just
it's bad.
I mean, like, I'm not worried about all this like Elon Musk is a bad guy, blah blah. Just run the thing properly, Elon. Just run it properly. You know, stop messing everything up and making it silly and not work. He's like one of those guys that's just clearly you don't know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. People mad at him. Well, guys, that's all we have for time for this evening. But we got a banger on TIR tomorrow. I won't be here, obviously. But it's I believe it is Bertram Cooper has a new article in the Atlantic where he shall be talking about he's talking about the failure of affirmative action at Harvard. Who would have thought that affirmative action implemented by an Ivy League university would fail? But yet it happens. So with that, I am going to bid everyone farewell. And instead of running the usual outro, I'm going to run an ad that we have from our good friend, the Letter Hack, who has a YouTube channel and podcast. So with that, all hail the Progressive Confederacy.
Jesus Christ.
And we are out.
Hi there, I'm the Letter Hack, the cartoonist for the left. Are you sick and tired of hearing the news reported by overpaid shills for capitalism? Have you had enough of being lied to by corporate-funded cable news hosts? Then you're probably looking for an alternative to legacy and mainstream media. Well, so am I. And believe you me, there are plenty of other voices on the left doing good work speaking truth to power. Every week I use my platform to promote them in order to make sure you know that you have options when it comes to listener-supported podcasts, newsletters, articles, and media activism. But there's a catch. I'm an artist and a big nerd, so whether I'm interviewing a guest or showcasing a particular indie news outlet, there's always art involved. So, if you're desperate for a change in who you get your news commentary from, and you're a fan of pop culture, comics, and art in general, check out youtube.com/theletterhack. Live streams are every Monday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, but I'm creating more content all the time, so hit subscribe to make sure you get notified. Don't miss out. After all, the need for independently funded left-wing media isn't going anywhere, which means there's plenty of work still to do. So come hang out, watch me draw for a while, and learn about alternatives to the mainstream. That's YouTube.